Shalom, people. This is Brother Lyles coming at you with another video. I'm making my morning run for groceries, and I decided I wanted to do a follow-up on a lesson that my wife and me did last night on learning how to operate in the end times, and just wanted to bring to point the object lesson from the mid-1970s dealing with preparing for the end times. I think I stated this in a prior video that at that time, and I was a young man at that time, there was a kind of a buzz in the air that Jesus or Yeshua was on his way back because of all the stuff that was going on in the Middle East and with Israel. And you also had the book and the I think movie, The Late Great Planet Earth by Hal Lindsey, talking about prophecy, and a bunch of other prophecy books that had came out. And you also, had the thing going on with the with blacks and whites, coming out of the 60s. There was great racial upheaval and, talks of, terrorist attacks and the United States government being overthrown by communist-backed black power groups. And so everybody was saying in their mind, oh, this is the end. Yeshua is coming back within 5 years. He's coming back. This is it. And as we know, it drug on into the 80s. Got to the 80s, they said that Ronald Reagan was the Antichrist because of his name having 3 R's in it, and they spent that some kind of way. Then Mikhail Gorbachev came out, and they said he was the Antichrist because he had that little birthmark on his forehead, and him and Reagan were, best of friends. And then you had some that said Pope John Paul was the false prophet of the Antichrist, and I mean it was on and on and on. And the prepper thing, which they didn't call it back then, they called it survivalists. And then you had also the rise of the conservative talk shows that was springing out, calling them white Americans to get back to the way things was when they were a real Christian nation. So it's basically the same conditions that we have now. They were going through, is just being replayed. And I think you can hear that if you listen to some of the older YouTubers like myself that were in that time, that it feels like we back in the 70s again, especially with the Afro and the black power and everything. Although I can say you could kind of see a decline in the radicalism of black Americans as they started integrating into white corporate world and to some government jobs or whatever. Now that they were becoming part of the quote-unquote power structure, of course now you don't want that power structure to come down, because this is how you make your bread and butter. So you say, I want to change it from the inside out, and therefore I want to be as radical as I would have been to bring the whole thing down. And also the fact that a lot of radical groups were finding that the causes of other quote-unquote minorities was going to bring in bigger dividends for them. So you found a lot of black activists that also start merging with white activists that were trying to get rights for other minority groups for their sexual orientation, feminism, immigrant and Native American rights, and kind of the message of what was going on in our black community got deadened. And also with the conservative, or rather the Yeshua, Jesus is coming back, those people I guess started seeing that maybe our talk of Yeshua coming back it was premature, but we won't say that. We'll just create different groups out of this movement, like the moral majority, and prepare the earth for when Yeshua come back. And this is when you also had Pat Robertson with his Dominionism theory. I think he had the 700 Club started gaining popularity, and he was basically saying, well, Yeshua ain't gonna come back until we get dominion over the earth, and then all he gonna do is come and sit down after we had taken dominion. Because basically the same thing that had happened in the 1900s with the Adventism and Jehovah's Witness, when Yeshua didn't come back like they said, they just formed groups afterward and to try to keep that base of people that had been sitting there waiting for Yeshua to come back. Basically the same thing happened in the 1970s with the talk of Yeshua coming back and the racial upheaval as it started dying down. You didn't want those people to go back to the way they were. You wanted to keep them on edge and also keep the money flowing in. And so you had the moral majority with Jerry Falwell, Dominionism with Pat Robertson, the 700 Club. You had the rise of the Christian conservative talk show hosts and some conservative non-Christian conservative talk show hosts that was always doing the clarion call. And this is what now they call it the truthful movement, but back then it was the conspiracy theories, theorists or whatever that were talking about how many politicians in the government were communists. And so it was all these groups became driven by fear, and that became the politics also of the black Democrats to black people, is that the fear of going back to the way it was in the 60s. Although what we seen was there was no push of real black issues in the black community by our black politicians, because again, when they was able to get into the government and state houses, it was more lucrative for them to tag themselves on with the issues of other minorities where it was bigger money. That's why when Jesse Jackson, before he ran for president and all that, he was a staunch pro-lifer, even though there was no such term as that. But he did not believe in boarding of black people. He preached against that. But once he started getting up in the corridors of power, he changed his tune and started, with the ridiculous argument of, well, we have all these unwanted black babies that's gonna be born. What are you gonna do to take care of them? So don't take the right of the black woman to abort the baby, because if the baby is born, you ain't gonna give us the money to take care of them. So that's the woman's right. And so that's how they would justify all of this stuff. And all of this stuff was driven by fear. Driven by fear for us to lose our vote. But our vote was only put in mostly white Democrats in the real positions of power. We had black Congress people, no doubt, but they was only to help back the issues of the white Democrats, to keep them in power, and also to tell us the little bit of gains that you had, you got to continue to vote Democrat, or else you would or that was gonna basically put you back on a plantation. And it's the same situation that we're in now, even with the Democrats coming out saying, Trump is out. Back then it wasn't Trump, though. It was Richard Nixon, and then Ronald Reagan, and then Bush. And make no bones about it. Yes, policies were created that was going to seriously impede the little bit of progress, definitely, that we got. But the progress that we as black people were supposedly made by putting black Democrat congressmen in and keeping the white Democrat intelligentsia in power, it didn't get us what we wanted, I believe, overall in the black communities. Maybe a black middle class, but the black middle class that interest and direction was pointed to just merge themselves along with the white middle class, which was not going to help the poor blacks of our community. And therefore, what happened? You had the rise of the black political Pan-Africanists that stated, hey, we need to, basically it was a kind of a back to Africa kind of movement to get away from all this. And you did find where there was some blacks that were aligning themselves with communist Cuba and other black communist countries in Africa, and this is where you had the continuation of the black COINTELPRO movement by the FBI and the CIA, that blacks were going over to communist countries and training to come back here to try to overthrow the government. And this is why I believe that Jonestown and it was an interesting video made by a gentleman named, well, it's not his name, but his name of his YouTube channel is Issachar. He had a great video, I believe, on there about the Jonestown, where he talked about how at the same time that Jonestown was going on, they had other black Hebrew Israelite minded camps that had moved to Guyana and was in the same area, where the leaders had basically stated we weren't going to get a fair shake here in America, and we needed to go into other black countries. And also, we can't forget the thing with the Ben Ami in Dimona, Israel. So all the same things as we got going on now is replaying itself. I'm saying all this to say this: be careful out there. This is some good information. I believe, a lot of the things that that I've studied for myself, dealing with some of the teachings of the Hebraic understanding of the Bible are true. But let's be careful of stating when Yeshua is coming back and what we all need to do right now, because you don't want to get caught up in this thing, and then when it blows over, you find yourself in some country unsupported, or you ostracize your family, and you ran into a group of people that always come with every religious group that just there to hawk money, and then when it's all said and done, your faith in everything is gone, and you just drop away. And I do kind of see that happening with some of the people that were part of this quote-unquote Hebraic movement, that some now don't believe in anything. They don't believe in nothing. So I would just kind of caution our people, live for Yah, learning, at the pace that, and I know that we know that time is always short, but they were living in the end times when Paul and the apostles were writing, and we still are living in the end times, because the time that Yah has is different than our time. That doesn't mean that we, are supposed to quote unquote drag our feet on the things that Yah tells us, but we gotta make sure it's Yah that's talking to us, Yahuwah that's talking to us, Yeshua that's talking to us, and not somebody else that gets us to rush into something that Yah didn't tell us to do, and then we come back and whatever little faith that we had is dead, because we put ourselves out there in a place that He never told us to go. And it turns out maybe some of the information that you got from this teacher or teachers was not exactly what Yeshua was actually showing us, or Yah was showing us in the scripture. Because there is a scripture that says there is no private interpretation. So we have to be careful if we start getting into too much of the radical interpretation of the word. Not saying that we gotta follow multitude, because we know it says don't follow multitude to do sin. But if it gets out, we start getting into doctrines that we obviously know is getting us way out there. Like, let's relocate to Jordan, or let's relocate to Egypt, because according to my interpretation of the Bible, we need to flee Babylon right now. I would tell you, hold up on doing anything. Now, I really believe that when it's time for us to get up out of here, when it's time for the Exodus or whatever, there's going to be such a divine move by Yah that it's not going to be no doubt on nobody's mind what He's trying to do. Because right now you got a multiplicity of people on what they believe the Exodus is, and what they believe is going to be the end times, whether there's going to be ships to come back to get us, whether it's going to be spaceships to come back to get us, whether there's going to be angels that are actually going to come and grab us and fly us away, whether there's going to be us going over to the deserts of Sinai Peninsula. I mean, not the Sinai Peninsula, but the Arabian Peninsula, to wander around there for a couple of years before we go into the land. It was all kinds of, are we going to be in the land a couple 100 years and then Yeshua is going to come back? There's so much. So I'm telling you, be careful out there. If you go back to the 1970s, you probably will find all kinds of books written about Yeshua coming back, end times, that not even in print no more, because a lot of the stuff that they stated didn't come to pass. And even the fact that amongst the white theologians in the before the 1900s came, and the rise of the Khazari Ashkenazi and Zionist movement, that a lot of people believe that England was the new Israel, that the throne that Queen Elizabeth sat on had an actual stone that Jacob laid his head on, and that London was New Jerusalem, and that's where the thing came, the sun never sets on the British Empire. A lot of people thought that Britain, because they believed in the replacement theology, had replaced Israel as Yah's chosen kingdom on earth. And that quickly dissipated, and you don't hear that now. It's in the worldwide church. That morphed into the worldwide Church of God and what they call British Israelism, Armstrongism. And also, let's not forget Mormonism. Let's not forget Mormonism. All this stuff rose up off of people saying Yeshua's coming back. This is the end time, whatever. You got to get yourself in it. So I'm telling you, please, 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 people, be careful out there. Be led by the Ruach. I do believe that we as black people, descendants of slaves, and those in Africa, I do believe that we are the actual people, Bantus. I believe that, no doubt about that. And even back then, we know they believe that. But let's be careful about how we are structuring our beliefs on, quote unquote, current events too much, and not making sure, first of all, that we are born again. You gotta be born again, and also filled with this Ruach, so that you won't make some premature steps in your life that will affect you not only naturally but also spiritually. Just a precaution. Seek Yah, seek his feeling of his spirit, to walk in his Ruach every day. And if you see this video, I want you to give it the thumbs up. I want you to like it. I want you to share, and I want you to subscribe and leave a comment. Be blessed.